Good morning all, and welcome to officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the Agricultural Development Bank, and the Auditor General's Department to today's sitting of the Public Accounts Committee, in which we will be treating with an examination of the reports of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the Agricultural Development Bank, that is the ADB, for the financial years 2014 to 2018. Good morning again. My name is Devindranath Tanko, and I am the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, appropriation accounts of monies expended out of sums granted by Parliament to meet the public expenditure of Trinidad and Tobago. B, such other accounts as may be referred to the committee by the House of Representatives or as are authorized or required to be considered by the committee under any other enactment, and C, the report of the Auditor General on any such accounts. The purpose of this meeting is for the Public Accounts Committee to conduct an examination of the reports of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the Agricultural Development Bank for the financial years 2014 to 2018, to assess whether the ADB's expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it, to assist the ADB in achieving the efficient execution of its mandate while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval, to determine the challenges being faced by the ADB and the possible solutions to these challenges. And based on the issues identified, the following representatives were invited to today's public hearing: the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the Agricultural Development Bank, and the Auditor General's the Auditor General's Department. This meeting is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11, on Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners are invited to send their comments related to today's inquiry via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, or X, which is formerly Twitter, @ttparliament. I will now invite members of the Public Accounts Committee here present today to introduce themselves, beginning at my right.
Good morning. I'm Jillian John, Vice Chair of the committee. Thank you.
I would now invite officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to introduce themselves and their team.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to everyone. My name is Rick Javed Ali. I am the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good morning. My name is Chris Ramkisoon, Planning Officer 3, Agricultural Planning Division, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Can we now have the persons representing the ADB to introduce yourselves, please?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Farid Antar. I am the Chairman of the ADB. To my right is Wendy Samsundar Bihari, the acting CEO. Seated behind me is the Deputy Chairman, Kimia Valentine, and to her left is the Corporate Manager of Finance and Administration, Gleason Garaway.
Thank you. And now may we have officials from the Auditor General's Department to introduce themselves, please.
Good morning. Anisha Bash, Assistant Auditor General, Acting.
Morning. Sita Bidesi, Audit Senior, Auditor General's Department.
Good morning. Cheryl Wright, Audit Director.
Thank you very much all. Welcome again to the Public Accounts Committee hearing. May I now invite, so we'll do it the other way around now, the representatives from the Auditor General's Department to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee, Deputy PS, Ministry officials, officials of the Agriculture Development Bank, and the viewing public. Section 8(1)(a) of the ADB Act states, the accounts of the bank shall be audited annually by the Auditor General or by a professional firm of chartered accountants approved by the Auditor General. The Auditor General was the auditor for the period under review today which is the financial years 2013 to 2017. Issues that arose during those audits were resolved, except for the establishment of a pension scheme, which is a requirement by Section 25 of the ADB Act. However, that issue did not obviously affect the opinion for the years under review today, the audit opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you and your committee members and to all of my colleagues present here today. The Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries is pleased to participate in today's inquiry into the audited financial statements of the Agricultural Development Bank for the financial years 2013 to 2017. The Agricultural Development Bank is a major source of financing for the development of the agricultural and agro-business sectors in Trinidad and Tobago. The bank is governed by Act No. 3 of 1968 with a mandate to encourage and foster the development of agriculture, commercial fishing, and industries connected therewith, and 2, mobilize funds for the purpose of development. It is to be noted that the ADB is the only bank in Trinidad and Tobago that is dedicated solely to the financing of agriculture-related projects. Accordingly, the Ministry of Agriculture is cognizant of this critical role that the bank plays in contributing to the development of the agriculture sector and to national food security by funding activities along the agricultural value chain, specifically in the major categories of agriculture services, food crops, agro-processing, and the targeted support provided to the cocoa and fishing industries, respectively. The Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries acknowledges that the audited financial statements being considered now are several years old. However, we shall attempt to assist the committee by providing clarity on any matters raised during this inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Permanent Secretary. I would now like to invite the CEO or any other designate from the ADB to make a brief opening statement, please.
Good morning, Chair, members who are present here today, and members of the viewing public. Our mandate was explained by Deputy Chairman, by Deputy Permanent Secretary. I'd like to share, though, that the Agricultural Development Bank dates back to the 1800s, when it was called the Agricultural Bank and later the Agricultural Credit Bank. As a colonial agency with restricted legislation and limited resources, it was established as a mortgage lending institution. The objective back then was to assist the cocoa plantation owners. Later in 1965, the Agricultural Development Bank was drafted and we were enacted on the 25th of January 1968. Today, the bank started in 1968 with a portfolio size of 5 million, and today it stands with $446.6 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam CEO. The process that we usually adopt is that I will initiate questions and therefore turn over the floor to my other colleagues who will also ask questions based on the submissions and based on some other issues that may have been brought to our attention. I want to begin with something that the Auditor General Department just indicated to us, which was that the pension schemes was the one thing outstanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. The pension schemes was the one thing outstanding from the ADB. Can the CEO or the chairman indicate what the current status of that pension scheme?
Chairman of Committee, my name is Gleason Garraway. I would answer that question.
Mr. Garraway, if you don't mind, I would like to see you a little bit clearer. So if you could shift to the side. Thank you.
Okay. All right. With regards to the pension scheme of the ADB, we have put measures in place to not only cost out the pension scheme that we need to initiate. That has been initiated for the last year, and that would be sent to the board. A report would be sent to the board for their consideration. Over the years, our pensions scheme has not been established because at the time in the past, it was discovered to be very costly, and as such, the pension scheme was not formed. But within the last year, we have initiated measures. Measures have been put in place to look at the different pension schemes that are available, and a report will be sent to the board on that.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I'm a little concerned that you would have indicated that the pension scheme would not have been pursued previously, especially bearing in mind the conversation your CEO, acting CEO just had with us, which identified how long the ADB has been in existence. So we would have had multiplicity of individuals who would have served their lives, entire lives, working at the ADB without the benefit of a pension scheme. Your concern that you raised just now is that one of the critical criteria for you all would have been that it was expensive, but a pension scheme is both a contributory, it's generally a contributory thing, so it should have been at some point in time considered. But let me ask the question then. So what would have changed between then, when you thought it was too expensive, and now when you are considering it, finally, after decades of the bank being in existence?
What would have changed would be the thought process within management, because past management would have seen that it was too expensive, but the present management, we are exploring the different avenues to have a pension scheme established, especially seeing that year upon year we have had audits, and throughout the different audits, we have always been advised by the Auditor General's Department that a pension scheme, as per the Act, has to be established. So I would say, in terms of it's a change in mindset through different, the new management that is present within ADB, and we are putting things in place to report to the board on those pension schemes that are available, what the cost would be, what the process will be, and it will be sent for the information of the board for their decision.
Mr. Garway, you just reminded me of the issue. The issue was not just that it was too expensive, it was a mandate of the Act of Parliament. So it was a requirement in law that the pension scheme be put in place. And it is therefore of some concern to myself that the Act has been ignored. An Act of Parliament, which makes this a prerequisite for the operations of the facility, has been ignored over an extensive period of time. I was trying to find out how long, what was the date on the Act which mandated this pension scheme be established, but I'm sure it's decades old. And even today at your present state, you do not have a pension plan in place. You are still in the preliminary works based on what you have told the committee. You are still in the preliminary works of establishing a pension scheme. Do you have any idea at all, given that you have already breached the Act for so many years, a time frame for when this pension scheme required by the Act of Parliament would be implemented?
Chair, I would say by the end of this financial year, I expect the information to be sent to the board within the month of July. So by the end of the financial year, a decision should be made in terms of the type of pension scheme that will be established. And I would think that by the end of the next financial year, which is 1st of October 2024 to September 30th, 2025, a pension scheme will be established.
Sure. I give way to my colleague.
So tell me, people have worked there for a number of years. You've reached a particular age, which is retirement age. What happens? What do you do? What have you been doing?
At present,
do you send them home with a lump sum payment? Or what? I can't imagine that you're sending them home with nothing. So what has been happening? Please share.
Persons who retire presently from the ADB, they partake what is called within the government and the government's pension. So they receive a pension from the government's pension.
I'm just curious.
Old age?
Hold on.
Sorry.
I'm just curious. I'm clear that no provision has been made for pensions for persons who would have worked, like I said, their lifetime under with the ADB. But you know that that is not standard practice with any other bank. Now, the ADB in our previous communications to us boasted about being just like every other bank. Just to wind this up, because I'm clear that there's a fault, there's a promise, a commitment by your good self, which I hope will be echoed by the CEO acting, that a pension plan of some sort will be provided so that workers can benefit from some sort of security when they retire. But just for clarification, can you give an indication based on the amount of years that the Act has been in existence and the amount of persons, and the bank itself has been in existence, what kind of numbers of persons would you estimate would have passed through the ADB as employees over that extended period of time?
Chair, I would not be able to give a approximate figure because you're talking about from 1968 to present. But that information could be furnished to the committee at a later date.
Okay, so you just answered the question that I wanted to phrase differently. From 1968 to current, you would have had hundreds, if not thousands, of persons who would have worked their entire lives at the ADB up to retirement age and step out. Now, does ADB operate based on the national retirement age so that persons who, when they retire from ADP, would now be retiring into government type pensions? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, Chair.
As it is of some concern, and I take some hope from the commitment that after, from 1968 to current, finally there seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel. We will hold you to that, sir.
Yes,
Can I just get those, just for the completeness, because you are going to do your part and submit by July. The board then has to review and make a determination. So can I ask the chairman of the board, chairman of the board of the ADB, whether he can also endorse the commitment being provided by the corporate manager for finance and administration.
Thank you, Chairman. And one, just to clarify, retired staff benefit from pensions under the public service scheme. It may not be adequate when we do our calculations. So I give the commitment on behalf of the new board that we will ensure that we comply with the Act. This is a mandatory requirement, as you rightly point out. We will have to go through a process and have the actuaries tell us, guide us exactly how we transform from one scheme to the next and what would be the impact, and if there are historical numbers we need to bring in. So that will be done within the new fiscal year, as indicated by Mr. Garraway. We are committed to having that done.
Thank you. Major issue, but I want to move on to other issues. In your submissions to the committee, of course, we're looking at a time frame. So you were supposed to be before us for quite a while. We've had some positives and negatives going forward. So I'm glad that you all are here today. So some of the questions that I'm going to ask may be based on the submissions, which are quite dated. So really, they are for clarifications now. So in your submissions to us at November 2023, so that's a few months ago, the financial statements for the ADB for financial year 2021 and 2022, at that point, at November, had not yet been submitted to the Auditor Generals for Department for review. Can you confirm or deny whether or not the financial years, the audited financial statements for 2021 and 2022 have in fact been submitted to the Auditor General?
The 2020 financial statement is currently with the Auditor General's Department. 2021 is ready and waiting for it to be scheduled. 22 has not yet been submitted to the Auditor General's Department.
Again, I don't have the law in front of me, but there's a fixed mandate and time frame for most entities, most reporting entities to submit within a specific time frame. Maybe the Auditor General could confirm with me whether or not that applies to the ADB so I could pursue this a little bit more aggressively. Is it that ADB can simply submit when they are completed with their documentation, or is there a statutory timeline for submission?
Chair, I'm not sure what the Act says with respect to that. It's not like the other entities where they have to submit it within 3 months. I don't think the ADB Act, but I'll have to get back to you on that one, Chair.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, you're a new chairman, correct? You said there's a new board. How long has this board been in existence?
We came into existence on the 8th of March, so we are just over 3 months old. And we have delved into some of these issues. What I understand, and Mr. Gary, if more information is needed, but I think it's noted in our response, one of the main, we have traditionally submitted within time. There was a query in the 2018 account with respect to revaluation of property. Going through the government surveyors to give us the valuation department. Took quite a time. That has been resolved, and that was the primary cause of the delays. And then the adjustments had to be done in the accounts.
Yeah. So I understand that would have been the keepback for 2018, 2019, 2020, correct?
19, 20, 21. It was raised in 2018, I believe.
Correct.
So 2019 was delayed because of that. Then we had to make the adjustments in 2020 and 2021.
All right. So do you have a time frame for when 2020 and 2021 and now 2022 and going into 2023 will be finished?
Well, as mentioned, the 2020 is with the Auditor General. 2021 is ready, waiting for it to be scheduled because you have to get into the queue and it's to be scheduled, from what I understand, which could be confirmed. 2022 is also ready, I believe. But we have not, I'm not sure, we can confirm whether we communicated that to the Auditor General Department. Yes, it has been communicated. So those are to be scheduled for the audits. We currently have the audit going on, as I indicated, for 2020, and we indicated 21 should be soon. And our goal is to get up to date as soon as possible. 2023 is to be signed off, and that will bring us up to date, I think, within the next couple of months.
Okay. Question to the Auditor General's Department. Given the statement by the chairman, Mr. Antar, that submissions for 2020, I believe, have been submitted so far, and he's waiting on a queue for guidance as to when the rest can be examined. Can you advise what is your current state of readiness to treat with the ADB's accounts to get them up to speed? Because we have a situation that the Public Accounts Committee is now looking at seriously, where we have multiplicity of state entities who are responsible for billions of TT dollars that have not been kept up to date with their submissions as required by law and even by practice for many, 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 many years. We've had outstanding submissions outstanding for decades in some instances. I'm grateful to hear that the ADB is anxious, as we are, to get up to speed and up to date. But can you, just with regards to the ADB at this point, indicate whether or not you are ready for ADB's, for the audits to be examined with regards to ADB itself?
Currently, we are working on 2020. We're in the reviewing stage, and that should be completed maybe by the end of July this year or mid-August. But we would not start an audit unless the signed financial statements are submitted to the department. So we are waiting on the 2021 financial statements and 2022 to be submitted. And only then we can schedule the audit.
Right, so I just want, that's the clarification I wanted. I just want to make sure that ADB does not have to wait for you to be ready. Once they're ready, once your documents are ready, once your audited financial statements are ready, you send it to the Auditor General's Department. That's my understanding of the process. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So once your board approves your audit, your documentation, your report, it should be sent straight to the Auditor General's Department. for review so that they can schedule their processes accordingly. So I'm putting the ball back in your court. If you really want to get up to date, the only thing keeping you back is your good selves. So if the audits are finished, you should be this afternoon, as you go back to office, submitting to the Auditor General's Department.
We are committed to meeting our deadlines and submitting to the Auditor General. I can say safely that we are wrapping up 2023 and we will make all efforts to ensure that they get to you on time. I'm committed to getting that before the end of next week, at least for the 2022 financial statements.
And 2021?
21, 22, yes.
Thank you. I want to turn over to my colleagues now. Senator, you may start.
Does the ADB have a mobile app?
No.
No? Do you plan on doing that?
We are considering a core banking system, and consideration will be given to the inclusion of the app.
So it's a stage where you are now considering it? Yes?
Yes, we are. The core banking system, yes.
Now, you stated that your goal of growing your clientele as well as expanding its reach with a greater focus on the youth in agriculture was the reason behind the increase in the amount spent on promotion and advertising between financial year 2016 and 2017. How successful has that been, reaching the youth, focusing on the youth? Are you satisfied with the progress you've made?
Well, first of all, the strategy was based on the demographic of the farming population. So we do have an aging farming population. So by our mandate and by extension, the intention for ADB's portfolio to grow, we must target the youth in agriculture. We have still had moderate levels of inclusion of young people in the portfolio. That is not only pegged to their ability to access credit, but also to their interest in agriculture. So a holistic approach to onboarding and getting the young persons interested in agriculture was done by the ADB and continues to be explored in collaboration with agencies who do share mandates of interest for the young people, not just in agriculture, but also entrepreneurs who are engaging in the business of agriculture and by extension, rural development.
What agencies of government are you liaising with?
We have worked over this period. We have done work with the Ministry of Agriculture for capacity building. So at this point in time, we continue to do that work, not just only for building capacity for borrowing, but also the technical capabilities to get the job done. We also work closely with the MyDNS, and that's the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service. We are part of their programs that target young people in agriculture. During the period of this review, we also worked with YBTT, and ADB has sponsored some of the initiatives targeting and attempting to generate interest for young people in agriculture. We also recognize and acknowledge our young people and other partners who are doing it on their own, and one such organization, group I can think of would be the YFARM young person. The interest of that group is really to target young persons and persons in rural communities who have interest in agriculture, but their focus is also to making them fit for agribusiness. So that is a private partner who has, shown interest for advancing young persons in agriculture.
I've seen a lot out there with the Ministry of Youth and Development, but I can't say that I've noticed, any thing coming from your particular, from Ministry of Agriculture, so that the youth will know what is available to them. Have you been working on promotion of the availability of resources and so on?
Sure. So ADB has a memorandum of understanding in place with NEDCO as well, where we do engage in building capacity and making those persons aware of all the facets of engaging business and making their projects viable. One particular area that I can say ADB has a direct collaboration with is the Business Accelerator Program, where we have an existing MOU to provide participants, so ADB actively engage with youth in agriculture and also prospects from our outreach activities who may have an interest. We do the referral, and we're actually preparing right now for cohort 4 of the Business Accelerator Program in collaboration with NEDCO.
So you're planning to put, more ads out there, television and so on, so that people would know what is available?
Yes, we can do that as well.
You can, but are you planning to?
Most definitely, we have a business advertising budget that we will aggressively use to encourage young persons to get involved in agriculture.
I hope it will be aggressively pursued.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I were just to follow up on my friend's questions here, do you have an IT department at the ADB?
Yes, we do.
Does that IT department deal only with in-house IT-related issues? Let me just clarify. The reason for the question is that we are in a technology-driven world, and the mobile app is one easy. I'm in the process of doing one for someone now, so I'm aware it's a very basic tool which reaches hundreds of thousands of persons in the blink of an eye. And therefore, the fact that the ADB has not engaged that level of technological development, which easily meets clientele, possible clients in heartbeats. Do you have a Facebook page? Yep.
Yes, we do. So
Twitter, Instagram?
Facebook, Instagram, and we do have an active website as well.
All right, so what is missing is the mobile app. Like I said, I think it's a very basic, and several of the other government institutions, agencies, have in fact used it as an outreach program, and I believe that every other bank in this country has a mobile app for the engagement of services, etc. There are several requirements with regards to a bank, but it's been done before. And if it's one takeaway from today's session, I want you to consider seriously, aggressively pursuing access to a mobile app. Largely because if you consider where farmers are generally in rural communities. It is therefore very difficult for them to leave the rural communities to engage in transactions at a bank where you are located, wherever you are located. It might be a lot easier for the farmers to be able, at the fingertips, through the use of a phone, to be able to engage, to check their accounts, etc., and to engage in transactions, especially given the rest of the world, which is engaging in transactions via mobile apps, via mobile communications, etc., including purchasing of raw materials and supplies, etc., So I think if you actually have a mobile app up and running, it will be of tremendous benefit to farmers wherever they are, and to suppliers of goods and services to farmers. So I think you should spend some aggressive time looking at that as a real opportunity, especially given that, I'm a little concerned that ADB may not have kept up with the level of technological development that the rest of the world is going in, and therefore not being able to maximize the benefit in terms of revenue generation and expenditure that can come from an app such as this. Yes? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may add, that I accept that is something we need to aggressively pursue. It's the way of the world. It's how we reach the youths and how we reach the rural communities. What I would like to just mention is that ADB is not a clearing bank in terms of we're not connected to the payments network directly. It is through our bank account with our bankers. So moving payments in and out of ADB, specifically your ADB account, so another bank account, is currently not available. It will be done as an interbank transfer through ACH and so forth. But it will give access. So the farmers would tend to have their banking account and move money to our collection account, and then it goes in allocated to their account. So it is not as seamless or as simple as the other banks have it, but certainly it is a tool, and we would like to get to that point, not necessarily being a clearing bank, but to have the mobility for real-time payments. So those are things we do have. I would say that prior to COVID shutdown, the bank did have the initiative to replace the banking system. The process was almost completed. COVID came. Now the proposals are 4 or 5 years old. We are going to reignite that process. The mobile app is not as dependent on the core banking system, as you rightly said. It could be an independent that reads into. And for now, we could even do sort of a dumb site that has the data and the information and collect and provide data, which we could use when we fully engage with the electronic world.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very grateful again to hear you say those very positive directions that you're proposing to go in. Given the age of the bank, I just hope that you have the opportunity to so do in the very shortest period of time. As technology changes, it may only be a matter of time before another version that is much more effective than just a mobile app may show up. And I would really hope that ADB will catch on to this technology development phase to get a little bit more interaction between farmers and your good selves. Yes? I want to turn over now to my other colleague.
Chairman, maybe the ADB could look at what they are doing in Africa and India by using the smartphone. I mean, that is widely used, where they use everybody have one of these in their hand. So they have been using that. That might help you with the fact that you don't have the wide or vast branch network, because by the money going into one of the commercial banks, then into your account, that probably, does that put a higher cost of doing business on the farmers?
Vice Chair, I don't think it puts a higher cost. It puts an inconvenience and maybe a delay. The M-Pesa and so forth, I have some experience with that working in Ghana for a few years. It is a very efficient system, primarily driven by the telecom sector. Trinidad, I know, has been trying to get this mobile payments system up and running. Like a couple licenses were issued, one to TSTT and a couple other vendors. So that's a platform we could, if it's available, ADB can use that platform as an agent and has an account suite. So it would be something that we may not be able to do ourselves, but certainly once it's available in the market, we can also participate. It is very effective, and the payments on the mobile payments in Africa way exceeds banking payments.
So the thing is, because when you loan money, you want to be repaid, and people, as the chairman pointed out, a lot of your customers come from rural communities. They spend 2-3 hours in traffic, right, when they want to be in the garden. So that is something you really need to look at, and not maybe you have to be innovative in this regard. Chairman, I've been looking at your SWOT analysis from your strategic plan, and basically, I'm seeing where it seems as if the ADB is more focused on dealing with the AML and CFT more than the customer, and to me, the agriculture itself. I mean, that is good, but certainly I think, yes, you're a bank and all of these things are wonderful, but in looking at the plan, I find more focus needs to be put into the actual, as I like to call it, the core function, which is if people don't plant, you don't have any customer. I heard your deputy CEO, your acting, CEO, spoke about the growth of the bank with respect to the market cap, and it was 400 and something million, and that's over what, a century, over 100 years? Since the bank has been in existence? Okay, fine. So I wonder, in terms of the rate of growth, what do you think about the rate of growth? And is it that your competitor is the normal financial institution, the banks with a wider branch network? What is it? Because I find that it's slow. I don't know. You could tell me. I'm not in the business. So is it that it is good? Good compared to what?
If I may, Vice Chair, I will give my comment and then ask the acting CEO for more on the ground. I can honestly say I don't think we have capped out where we could be. We have stagnated for the last maybe close to a decade in terms of our portfolio size. One, there's demand, and our need to work with our partners to create that demand, because clearly agriculture is a key element. And through COVID, we have seen how important it is to be as self-sustainable as you can be in feeding your nation. Unfortunately, when the panic goes, we tend to forget some of these things. But as a nation, we need to push that agenda. ADB is a critical tool in that. I feel we have the capacity to do more, and it all, as you said, rightly said, in a properly articulated strategic plan with clear action items, and this is what we have tasked the management to do in their next planning cycle, and we will hold them accountable for that, as we will be held accountable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So, for more specifics, the acting CEO could jump in.
Yes, thank you. Just to put some figures to the agricultural credit market share, ADB stands around 70%, 69.7 thereabout, for the period 2022. Certainly, we do feel that we can do better and attract more entrants into the bank, but by extension, build capacity for participation in the agriculture sector. 70% thereabout, we have seen some challenges with respect to new market entrants in the agriculture sector, and that is from commercial banks and other finance companies willing now to finance agriculture and agribusiness.
69.7% or the 70% as you have here, it's good by any standard, but the point is that is the size of the market. All right, so you have to now look at market expansion. And I don't know if you are into what I will call backward and forward integration, meaning what the end-to-end means, whether it is the plant in the crop, where you encourage that, including the young people, I saw it mentioned somewhere, stimulating some kind of interest from them. So you have the planting in the crop, right down to some kind of manufacturing. Some people talk about from farm to the table, or you are taking it from the farm to some manufacturing process. Is it that you do that kind of end-to-end lending?
So yes, we fund all the activities along the agricultural value chain. The limitation that the bank has, though, is we do not provide any type of foreign currency, and therefore our lending is restricted to TT dollars.
Okay, so that is something you have to advocate with the minister. Is the line minister the minister of agriculture? You have that's a line minister for you? Yes. Well, all right, so you have to advocate, because if that then makes you less competitive, because I'm seeing you saying here the high transaction cost of doing business in developmental bank, because I'll suspect that sometimes the market, what do you call it, the return on the investment is not as elastic within the agricultural sector. So people are very price conscious, very price sensitive. So if the cost of borrowing is too high, then you have an issue. So that is something you have to talk. Before you answer that, I want to go to, because I'm just looking at your SWOT, and in your opportunity side, no, is it your opportunity or your threats? Hold on. In your threat side, you spoke about Ukraine and the disruption of the supply chain. However, I saw that as an opportunity, because it's sad that they have a war there, but certainly that should be an opportunity for us, where we become more aggressive, because the Minister of Trade, who is I think a member of this committee, you will hear them calling some numbers which should be very concerning. But that should be an opportunity for the bank. And that's what I call backward integration, where you go to the farmers and say, you need to plant more in these crops, because these are the crops we are importing and expending huge sums of scarce forex on. Is it that you see that as your role, or you wait for somebody to walk in the door, you try to stimulate demand?
So most definitely, ADB will get out to the public. We continuously do that by reaching out to the rural communities and the areas identified for productive farms. Our primary engagement, though, is in primary production, and therefore our efforts and our marketing outreach is really targeted to those communities. We also fund fishing and the industries connected to both to primary production and agro-processing. In Trinidad and Tobago, though, the controls over the input supplies, we are limited as a financial institution to have any direct impact on that. However, the financing that is required for farmers to meet the input supply cost is available at the ADB.
Again, I'm saying you are looking at just such a market cap over the years, and feel, because this is really the Agricultural Development Bank, Ministry of Agriculture, and all of these institutions are really needed in this country, not only to lend money in a static way, but also as a creator of jobs, right? And really to get our youth, because we have a crime problem. In the rural communities, gangs have migrated there. And basically, I mean, I don't know if you see that as a social corporate responsibility. I will if I was head in the bank, certainly. Because you say, okay, what do I do with these rural communities? Maybe, and one has to get creative in their strategic plan. I find your strategic plan just follow the same old methodology. How can I maybe look at what the government is doing, spending money, in terms of trying to create jobs, and it's not making as much sense, meaning, okay, maybe if I think instead of CPEP, they do Agri-PEP, whatever that is. You know, so I said, government, give me the money for in this area that you would otherwise have allocated to CPEP, and I will ensure that I join maybe with the Ministry of Youth that have some kind of program. I expand this program because now I'll have that money that I can loan to micro entrepreneurs or farmers, because these young men want to plan too. You know, it's just the opportunity or somebody not to point them in the right direction that they could do something, and we could kind of give present an alternative to bad behaviors or negative actions. And that's what I'm saying. Maybe I don't know if you all just wait for somebody again to walk through the door. And I think you all have to be much more active, because you could be a real force for good, particularly in this time, whether it is enhancing significantly the way we grow food, stimulate that food production in a real meaningful way. You know, is it that people, what kind of, I didn't quite get to see that in terms of the loans, your loan portfolio, Chairman, I don't know if you asked that or if you had that to ask. You know, in terms of is negligence, there's a term you use in the bank for people who are not honoring their commitment. What it is? They're not is more than that, not compliant. In terms of there's a rate of people not complying with the what's it called? Delinquency, exactly. What kind of rate do you have with that?
We have seen fluctuating delinquency rates, and within recent times we have seen some escalation.
Generally, what that means, that's
it's increasing.
Meaning, so you're at where in terms of sorry, acting CEO. In terms of lending, what you have loan to people who are honoring their commitment or people who are not honoring their commitment, and in what sectors you're seeing this lack of adherence to what they sign the contract?
We are seeing it in the area of primary production, where there are challenges with respect not just to the client's behavior to their credit, but external factors that do impact the projects. So within recent times, we have had some impacts of climate change. We have had increases in input supplies, and these factors have affected the overall production and the realization of the projected cash flows. If our farmers do not realize their projected cash flows, they are not able to honor their debt. They do not borrow based on any salary slips or regular payments, even except the income generated from their projects. So once there's impact on the projects, we will have some challenges with debt repayment, and that separates us a little bit from the commercial entities where there are salary assignments and so on in place.
Sorry, stick a minute. I agree with that with respect to the delinquent, but you haven't given me a percentage as yet, so I'm waiting on that, quite frankly.
All right.
But more than I'm saying, yes, with the banding about the climate change, maybe that account for the rainfall and the amount of rainfall and then the hot sun we are getting. But given that we know, the mitigating factors, are we leaving it up just to the ministry and the government, or you as a lender will say, these are the things I can do to help you to ensure that you have maybe access road, water gates for the flood could go into some kind of retention pond. So when the rain is not falling, we have some level of irrigation. I'm not in agriculture, I just read this note this morning, and I'm just trotting that out. And I know it's not nonsense, okay? Because, I'm a manager. These are the things that will be coming to my head, because I want to stimulate this 69 point whatever that looks big, but it ain't big when you're looking at your market cap. It's big in relation to what, So, yes, so your rate of delinquency, please.
Yes, so I can give you figures as at the end of May 2024. The branches by the arrears by value is about 10.8%. Of course, in our recoveries department, that would be higher because all the loans that are transferred to the recoveries department are in default, and repayment at the branches could not have been negotiated, and therefore it's now transferred to for the process of recovery to engage. So, as a total, for the value of branches, as I said, 10.8%, just about 11% percentage of arrears by branch. The value of arrears is 31.9 for branches, $31.9 million for branches.
Overall, total?
Yes.
We are talking about delinquency. Is this the same as write-offs? Are these, so can you then provide me with some kind of clarification as to whether or not we have had write-offs being engaged in, and what the criteria would have been for any of those write-offs, and an idea of a value?
So the write-off value would be different for the period. However, write-offs actually occur at the end of the recovery stage, where we have exhausted all opportunities to recover from those loans. And the bank would make our recommendations for write-offs to be approved through the board of directors. I can provide in writing for you the write-off figures. It is done monthly, pending recommendations from the recoveries department. But just to answer your question, provide clarity on it, write-offs only happen after all areas for recovering on those loans have been fully explored at the ADB.
Sure. And I'm assuming that includes legal action, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we'd like to get a commitment from you, just to tie you to the commitment, is that over a period of, say, a decade, we can get an idea of the amount of write-offs we have had, and specifically during each of those years, the kind of delinquency we would have been looking at. In terms of loan repayment and arrears. I am aware that an entity may be delinquent in year 1, but would have met their payments in year 5. So it's just to get an idea of a trend that may have occurred over a period of time. I know that in 2020, during the COVID times, we would have had some level of challenges, but I think the figures would show trend, and then COVID being the anomaly, which would break the trend, but it would show a direction generally. Is that possible?
Yes, we can provide that in writing to the committee. Just for clarification, over a period of 10 years, the value of the write-offs annually?
Yes, please. Each year?
Yes.
Well, annually, yes, correct. We have a question. As you know, our audience is listening and viewing on television and so on. So we have a question from a member of the public, which I'd like to pose. With regards to the pension plan scheme that we were discussing previously. The question from the member of the public is, will the payments be made retroactively to persons who have qualified for the pension? I don't know if Mr. Garaway would be able to answer that question. Just to repeat, to give you some time to think it through. Will the payments be made retroactively to persons who have qualified for the pension?
Once we establish the pension scheme, those persons who would have previously retired would still enjoy being part of the government's pension scheme. Going forward, persons who are presently employed at the bank would enjoy benefits of the pension scheme going forward. So in terms of retroactive payments, previously, those persons who would have retired before would be still receiving pension from the government itself.
All right, just to clear that up, so that the ADB pension scheme will not in fact consider persons who would have been retired before the emergence of the pension scheme that you're proposing to establish, correct?
Correct, Chair, because of the fact that in going forward, both the ADB as well as the employees themselves would contribute to the plan. So in terms of persons who would have retired previously, they would not be contributing to the present plan, so they would not enjoy any benefits going forward.
Thank you. I'm sure that our listening audience will be paying attention to that and will probably have supplemental. They will send it to us if they do, and we could forward it, or depending on the time frame we get it, we could ask it here. I want to deal with one of your products from the ADB. It's called the ADB Secure Loan. In your submission to us, you indicate that the ADB Secure Loan provides credit to entrepreneurs for the purpose of securing their agricultural holdings against predial larceny, as well as their own personal security. That's on pages 6 and 7 of your submissions to us. But you also said that the ADB's secure loan was the least accessed option, the least accessed facility in the bank's suite of financial products during the period 2014 to 2017, even though predial larceny during that period and to date remains a critical factor amongst farmers, a critical issue of concern. So I have several questions related to that. Firstly, we have established that the facility was underutilized during this period, 2014 to 17, but I want to treat with the entire period to date rather than asking it in pieces. Given that it was underutilized during that period, did the bank take any action subsequent to 2017-2018 to ensure that a greater attempt is made to get farmers either aware of the product or to determine why it was not being utilized as efficiently and as effectively as you would have liked it to? Was any action taken by the bank to try to get more interest in this particular item, that is the facility where farmers could have borrowed money from the bank for providing facilities, resources of some sort that will give them some greater security for their farms and for themselves?
Thank you, Chair. So our ADB farm security opportunities are for crops, livestock, vehicles, farm and family, and project site or residence. Our farmers, though, we have found their priority of interest is for direct investment in agriculture. So they will borrow firstly for input supplies, working capital to get the cultivation going or the livestock farm operating, because that is their source of income. On the priority list, though, the borrowing for securing their farm exists, but it is not their number one priority, primarily because of how they opt to utilize borrowing. The second thing is the farm security to them, in some instances, has not given them the security that they were looking for, and I would say that, yes, they would borrow for the installation of cameras or talk of the installation of cameras, but they, with respect to the effectiveness of the outcome of that type of surveillance, they have not always been fully convinced that it would have some direct impact. And I will give the example of the livestock industry, where we are seeing farmers involved in rural subsistence livestock production, where traditionally people may have 10 to 20 small ruminant animals, and I speak of, let's say, goats, for example. You would find that these, the investment in even surveillance or cameras and so on do not give them the desired protection. The animals are still stolen. They still have challenges with respect to securing them, whether on the farm site or on the grazing fields. So that in order of priority, our farmers have not opted to invest primarily in farm security based on the offerings that we have for surveillance equipment and so on. as well as the farmers themselves have articulated that, as I said earlier on, the challenge they have is meeting the expense of primary production, and therefore their focus and interest really is in getting production going so that the projected cash flow or the desired output can really be utilized to maintain their living requirements and their debt repayment, as opposed to securing the farm, which, yes, is a necessity, but not treated as a direct priority for financing, and that is for borrowing, for securing.
Okay, so I understand. As somebody who, as a member of parliament, representing a largely rural community that's heavily involved in agriculture, I can tell you from my own perspective that I have multiple farmers who have reported substantial pre-deal larceny. So they have in fact lost, some of them have lost their entire crops, some of them are losing livestock. And that directly affects what you would have described before, their ability to repay the loans, etc., that they would have taken. Has the ADB given any consideration to providing group type loans? So for example, instead of establishing a situation where we have security cameras just for farmer A and farmer B, we have security cameras that can be manned. I'm seeing that the police is doing it right now, not just the police, but private sector is doing it right now in streets in Oropouche, Western my constituency, in streets where they have cameras throughout the street, housed with the receiving screens, housed in various homes. Has the ADB given any consideration to lending blocks of farmers for the provision of security services, such as this, for example, where we would have been able to put cameras up instead of just farmer A and farmer B, in farmer A, B, C, D, and E in the general area, so that while the cameras will not prevent pre-deal larceny, it may help in catching the offender.
Chair, no, we have not, we do not engage group lending at the ADB. We do it for outreach activities. So we would organize our outreach activities through communities, through agricultural groups and so on, and that is for sensitization and building awareness of the products and services of the bank. But with respect to group lending, we have not engaged that as a strategy for the ADB in Trinidad and Tobago. The lending is still based on individual borrowings and company type loans.
Yep, I think that the outreach program falls squarely into a question that my colleague here is anxious to ask.
Tell me, first of all, what does an outreach program look like?
So that is a function of our business development department, and that is where we mobilize in different communities, for the ADB, mostly our rural and food producing communities, where we conduct active sessions, building capacity for lending. So we have done for the fisher folk financial literacy. We did it in collaboration with Central Bank some years ago, where we worked with the fisher folk to sensitize them on the value of keeping very good records. They do not have, as I said, they do not have job letters or pay slips that we can look at their income. So the value of good records management is what gives the bank some indication of your historic performance, and it is a mechanism by which we can actually use your figures to do some level of forecasting. So that is one area, financial literacy and building capacity. In Tobago, we did another outreach where, again, we focus on records management, but there we worked with that farming group to sensitize them on what they can borrow for and how they can actually use that borrowing to increase the productive gains on their farms. We also work with ETIS of the Ministry of Agriculture, who is responsible for building technical capacity. So recently there was an outreach, let's say in Bonsi Trace and Pinal Rock Road for cassava root crop production and so on, where technical experts would go once the ADB has the opportunity, whether it's on a weekend or outside the regular working hours, we mobilize our staff, we use our mobile unit, and we network with the community groups or whoever is the organizing group where we can. And there are instances where ADB will also organize and go to the people in their communities and share with them the opportunities available at the bank and do it collaboratively with stakeholders who might be able to help improve their fitness for borrowing.
How long would a session last?
It depends on the group size. Generally, I would say between 2 to 3 hours, because you have to, once you are mobilizing persons, you also want to maximize the benefits for them. So you would more than likely not have one participant. That is, if we are mobilizing. There are instances where other active groups or stakeholders mobilize, so their mandates are also shared at those sessions. For example, we did recently this week, we did with fishermen, so that it is not just the ADB presenting, and given that farmers make the effort to come out, you would make sure that the content delivered is sufficient and worthwhile for them. Therefore, to answer your question, it varies, estimated generally around 2 hours. We have to also leave time for the question and answers. There may be persons who are desirous of chatting with us after, so we stay back, engage them, and take their information so we can bring it back to the office, put into our database, and encourage lending thereafter.
Because you said that currently a mobile unit, banking unit, consists of only a driver and a marketing research officer who attends to all the customers at outreach events. So that if you have advertising campaign, people will come out, but you have just one person. I imagine it will create some kind of frustration. If you're waiting to ask your question, you have some burning question, you just have one person there to answer, and people are waiting. Are you thinking of increasing, access?
All right, so just to put some clarification to that, that is the lead, the mobile unit and the marketing officer, that is the lead for the networking. However, pending the location, the expected turnout, and the intensity of the event, we will mobilize our branch staff and go out. So for example, this week when they met with the fishermen, it was not only done with the mobile unit and the business development representative, but branch staff was mobilized to give active assistance on the day, primarily because we are anticipating a high level of turnout. If it is a public event that is well advertised and well organized, the branch located in a geographic area will provide backup support. So it's never an event where where there is expected to be high attendance and just the mobile unit driver and the officer is present. We'll always make sure that there is other representatives of the bank to assist.
Do you see yourself as having great opportunity in this time, where every time people walk into a grocery, price has gone up again? And everybody is talking about, we can't afford the food. So are you planning some kind of big push to assist so that we don't have to depend on outside sources so much? Because the ADB is going to be, lending people money to do things, to grow more food, to engage in all of the activities that come with farming. So that you are thinking in your mind that we're going to have a great plan to have a big push. And we're going to do this very soon, because this opportunity where people are complaining and people are suffering is a great opportunity for us to actually make a difference in this society. Do you see that as something exciting that you want to work hard on and do things?
So most definitely, and this is one of the directives of the new board, where we have been asked, management has been asked to relook the strategic plans and also to actively engage in for the next planning period, which we've already started, to look at a more intense plan for building that portfolio and also bringing some level of sustainability to the institution. So that to do that, we must engage our farmers, we must engage in borrowing that is viable. I want to mention, though, that the ADB is the financing arm of the Ministry of Agriculture, and it's very important, to acknowledge that we work in tandem with our
I'm about to ask you
stakeholders,
that.
because we do not provide technical support in-house for farmers. We rely on our line ministry to assist with respect to the technical capabilities required for the implementation of some of these agricultural projects. Additionally, the cost of goods, as you articulated just a while ago, I myself going to the vegetable store, the salesperson there saying to me, the cheapest thing is tomato, $18 per pound at that point in time, right? So we have to be aware that the cost of import supplies and the demand will also have impact on the price of goods sold in the agriculture sector.
And have you been mindful of the fact that with the invasion of the snails and so on, that people would have lost a lot, and therefore you would have engaged, you've been more sympathetic, you've engaged in, seeing what you can do, because people may not be able to repay their loans because they've lost so much. Have you been, less rigid with people with repayment of loans in light of what has happened? That was not their fault at all.
Yes, so at this point in time, yes, it's the invasion of snails, but pest and disease is a real factor in agricultural production. And we always have to cater for it. For example, in the Moruga district, the farmers were affected by the invasion of locusts. And as a caring institution, we need to reach out to our farmers, and we have done so. There are times when there's excessive flooding, and we would have the loss of livestock in particular. There are other crops that are more susceptible to flooding. We'll also have intense damage there. The ADB provides opportunities for restructuring, even for skip payments and so on, in the instances, of genuine distress on the farm. So that, yes, we do work directly with the farmers who are affected by natural disasters and pest and disease, to help them to bring their projects back to performing status. We are a development institution. By no means our first point of call will be recovery action on these farmers.
So you've been a bank with a heart?
I hope so.
You tried to be?
We have tried all up.
I'm comforted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member. I know that in your submissions you had indicated that the ADB was in the process of looking at the ADB Act to engage in some sort of amendments, because this would assist in you improving your role as lender for agricultural purposes and increasing your loan portfolio. This is actually in tandem with a question that was just asked from a member of the viewing public. So I had a separate question, but I will ask the question from the member of the viewing public. Very interesting question. Can the ADB's Act, as it currently sits, meet the current needs, business goals, etc. of clients and the ADB itself?
I believe there needs to be an adjustment to the Act, some adjustments to the Act. The ADB has made the recommendations. The Act is pretty dated. It was crafted in 1965 and enacted in 1968. There are certain specifications in the Act as well that restricts the institution from its lending and also its ability to function as an institution serving the sector in its entirety. I want to say that the interpretation of the Act has also been subject to different opinions from different legal minds, and the revision of the Act, I think, would put clarity for both the organization and the sector.
Thank you. Has the ADB submitted amendments to well, have you considered amendments to the Act based on what you have just described to us? Amendments are required, changes required. Have you considered what those amendments are, and have you submitted those amendments for consideration to the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries?
Yes, Chair, we have.
Question to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. Have you considered those proposed amendments, and what is the status of it at this point?
Well, Chair, as with probably all legislation has to evolve with the changes of of society, and whilst the submissions of the ADB may be relevant and in accordance with today's needs, the ministry intends to work hand in hand. So yes, we would have considered, and we will work with the ADB to formalize those suggestions and to create a proposal for the amendments and updating of the necessary legislation.
So I'm not going to ask for the time frame, because I'm not aware of what the time frame was that the ministry would have submitted, the ADB would have submitted the queries to you, the recommendations for amendments, etc. However, I want to remind you that the Act is antiquated. We have acknowledged that the Act is decades and decades old, and it has not kept up with changes that are much more practical in today's environment. And therefore, it falls onto the ADB and your good selves to expeditiously make proposals for amendments to bring it to Parliament, because even when it gets to Parliament, there's a time frame for even that to be considered. So I want to urge you to treat with this proposed amendments to the ADB Act as a matter of urgency for consideration. Yes?
Yes, Chair, we will take your guidance.
In your submissions to, this is to the ADB, in your submissions to the committee based on 2014 to 2018, and like I said, I want to carry it as most recent as possible, you identified that some of the critical risks facing ADB would have been financial risk, credit risk, and market risk. Credit risk and market risk, those risks are fairly standard, and even though the nature of it may have changed, the factors that they are basically the same types of risk requiring the same types of solutions. I want to treat with the financial risk. One of the risks identified during that period was the lateness in receipt of subventions from the government. Now, I noted in one of your submissions to us that there were a couple of years in which no subventions were received from the government, and you indicated then at that point that that was because none was required, that the ADB had enough, it was liquid enough to meet its demands from its revenue sources. That's my interpretation of when it was said that no funds were required at that point in time. That would have been, from what I'm seeing here, 2014 and 2017. But during this period, subsequent to that, so can you advise then, as ADB, whether or not you are still in receipt of government subventions, still in need of and in receipt of government subventions, just over the last 3 or 4 years?
Yes, Chair, we are in need of subventions. We lend at an interest rate of 2 to 4% in Tobago and 3 to 5% in Trinidad. With those interest rates caps on the bank, definitely the differential in earnings would require some sort of intervention, and for that reason, we continue to put forward our requests for subventions.
Have your performance as a bank been adversely affected by the level of subventions that you required compared to the level of subventions and the timing of subventions from the state?
I have been able to meet our commitments by way of internally generated funds for the last year. We have received subventions for last year. While it was not received in the time we anticipated or the value that was stated in national budget, it did provide the bank with a source of fund for lending. At this point in time, we are able to meet our lending obligations, both from the subventions that we receive and from the funds internally generated.
You just said something that got me curious. You said that you did not receive the allocation as reported in the annual budget. Is that correct?
As far as my knowledge extends, yes, Chair, the statements that are made in the line items, we would get part thereof, and that has always been the case with the ADB. But I would ask my corporate manager of finance just to make sure that that statement is correctly placed.
Just to add what our acting CEO would have stated, throughout the years, we have received subventions, not every year, and within that allocation that we have requested, we have always received a percentage of same. Right? So if it is we request 100 million, we may get 25 million. But as communicated by our CEO, between the principal repayments by clients as well as the interest that is earned, in addition to, if you look at the financials over the years from 2013 to 2017, we have managed to reduce our operational expenses by roughly 27%. So internally, we address the cost issue, but in terms of on lending, we have never made it a problem to have funds to on lend to individuals. So it has never been a sustainable issue to say that the bank cannot function and it cannot carry out its mandate. But in terms of the number of loans that we would like to get, in addition to the amendments that we would request in terms of the act itself to really expand the mandate of the bank so that we could also expand directly the interest income that is earned, that we could ensure for years to come that the bank would be sustainable.
All right, so if I'm just to make that point a little bit clearer. So you have not gotten the level of subventions that you think that you require. Based on your own assessments, you would have required X million dollars and you've gotten substantially less. And that has therefore affected your ability to expand the kind of portfolio that you would have liked to and therefore generate the kind of revenue streams that you would like to. Is that correct to say?
Yes, sure.
So obvious question to the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries. Your mandate would be to assist the ADB in achieving its mandate, which is to lend to the farming community, and as ministry, your objective would have been to try to encourage what my colleague here spoke about earlier, which is a greater level of food production, etc., and therefore ensuring that farmers have access to adequate loans as required for their operations would be a critical factor, not just for ADB, but for the overall policy of the Ministry of Agriculture. Can you indicate as to a rationale why we would have had a request for X dollars and a supply of something substantially less than X dollars from the ADB, given the critical mandate that they are supposed to be obligated to follow?
Chair, firstly, all state enterprises, all state entities would like to have a little more pie to be able to share around. Notwithstanding that, the Ministry of Agriculture does not make the actual decisions in respect of the quantum of a request and the actual quantum that is allocated. That is a function of the Ministry of Finance, right? And the subventions that are assigned to the ADB also, well, as I say, that comes out of the Ministry of Finance. So whilst I may agree with the ADB in terms of the need for, or the justification to request a larger subvention, I may use the opportunity here to say that we at the Ministry of Agriculture also would like to have a larger subvention, but unfortunately, you know, the pie maybe does not allow such. So the limits that are set by the Ministry of Finance and the allocation that is assigned to respective entities by the Ministry of Finance are what we are all required to work within.
Sure, and I understand that will be determined by government's policy itself. Just for clarification, so ADB would have asked via, because you are the aligned ministry, so ADB would have requested its level of funding from the line ministry, and your role then would be to do what? Just forward that request to the Ministry of Finance?
Essentially, yes, we do support. We would have engaged in, if there is necessity, we would engage with the entity making the request to ensure that the justification is sufficiently understandable. But our role and function, as you've summarized, will be really to facilitate this request for the consideration of the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you.
So maybe there's a role for us when you have the budget debate to, you know, to try to see what we can do for you, huh?
I would appreciate that sincerely, member.
We'll bear that in mind.
I think his line minister has to be the one championing that particular initiative. I know we don't have a representative from the HR department of the ADB present, but I have some questions treating specifically with the HR component of it. I don't know if the corporate manager or chairman, well, you all will determine who best can respond. I want to read a little bit because it would be a precursor to the question. As of January 2024, the internal audit department of the ADB was staffed by a full complement of officers provided on the organizational structure that you sent us. Is that correct to say? That you were fully staffed? That's the internal audit department. Yes?
Yes.
However, in your written submissions, you indicated that whilst the audit department is fully staffed according to the bank's approved structure, the operation of the department is constrained because of an inadequate number of staff members. This has been brought to the attention of the management in the past because the ADB has grown in terms of stature and services over the years, but the number of audit professionals has remained the same. As risks escalate, this is the ADB, is now unable to provide reasonable assurance in a timely manner on risks which may affect the organization's ability to meet its objectives. Responses from the auditees and the implementation of approved corrective action by management are not always done within a reasonable time frame. So what you're describing is that the organizational structure is fully staffed based on your org structure. You've met your mandate. It's required. The org structure says 10 people, you have 10 people. But because the bank's operations has grown, you have, in fact, that 10 persons may not be sufficient. Is that correct to say?
Chair, so there are 4 members of the audit team at the bank, and yes, the audit department has raised that concern with us.
All right, so they've raised concerns with the ADB. Can you indicate what action has been taken by the ADB? Because the audit function is a critical function, especially given the procurement legislation and so on and so on and so on. What action has been taken by the ADB to strengthen their staff requirement?
I can speak for what has been happening for the last 3 months or so. We have a new board who has a mandate, mandated the management to look at the recruitment and the policies that guide this in the bank. They have also mandated us to look at the vacancies and determine a priority list for them for hiring and filling those important vacancies. So that
these will be vacancies across the bank,
yes,
not just the audit department, because there are no vacancies in the audit department.
Yes, across the institution. So that is with respect to the recruitment for vacant positions. A part of that also involves the resource management, and the human resource manager, corporate manager, human resource, is also looking at the best fit for the organization. this would be taken up in part of our strategic plan because we will need to do a manpower audit to look at the resources and the alignment of the resources to meet the organization's objective. Whether that can be done within this financial year, the bank will have to look at the resources that we have and how best we are able to meet that objective. But I can assure you in the strategic plan, that will be an important part of aligning the current resources to the role and responsibilities of the organization.
Right. So have you reached out to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to find out whether or not they are in some way willing to assist in providing at least the short-term solutions for contract labor to be brought into the internal audit function? I'm focusing on just the audit department for now because there's a direction I want to go in.
Chair, we have.
Would you you have identified in your responses that it has in fact, that absence of sufficient staffing has in fact negatively affected your ability to do your job, to meet your mandate. Is that not true?
Yes, and as I said, we are currently looking at the recruitment and the filling of the vacancies in order of priority by way of the installation of our new board of directors.
Okay, but I want to focus on the internal audit department only. So I understand that you're reaching out, there are vacancies that exist elsewhere that you want to fulfill, but the question that I'm asking is based only on the internal audit unit, which is filled to capacity based on your communication to us, but it is not sufficient to effectively execute your mandate. It is on that basis, now you said you must do the human resource audit, etc., that will come in the strat plan. That's down the road somewhere. But at this point, what you have is not adequate to meet your needs. And therefore, outside of the organizational structure where you will bring in persons to fill on the establishment, whenever you amend your org structure, you now have a desperate need for personnel based on your communications to us to fill roles in the audit unit which do not exist. The persons don't exist, and the roles by definition do not exist in the audit unit itself. So therefore, you need to bring in personnel. You can wait until whenever the strat plan is completed and the manpower audit is completed, etc., etc., etc. And during that period, you would have had the constraint that you have now, which is it negatively affects your ability to do your job. Or you can bring them on contract, if necessary, with the approval of the ministry. So my question then is whether you have engaged the ministry to approve the employment of additional staffing, or whether the ADB itself can do that on the basis of the need for that staffing in the internal audit unit.
For the internal audit, no, Chair, we have not engaged the Ministry of Agriculture for any assistance with respect to the needs of the audit department.
But Madam CEO, you have indicated to us that there's some concern there. So therefore, there is desperately going to have to be a need, unless you think that the ADB itself can resolve that problem within its own organization at the very shortest possible time, because you are, in effect, the absence of that staffing, that additional staffing, has compromised your ability to effectively run the organization properly and efficiently and generate additional revenue streams. Not so?
Chair, I would say it has impacted us. The ability to generate additional revenue streams comes from the collaborative effort of the credit department and business development as well. But I do take your point of the additional oversight that is required. I also want to mention that the board has also directed us to look at an credit assurance officer, which will also provide some oversight for the administration of credit.
Ma'am, with the approval of your board, I want to suggest that you immediately engage, again, this is another recommendation. We have quite a few coming from today, but you immediately engage the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries with regards to filling those gaps which may not be vacancies because they don't exist on the establishment, but fill in those gaps in the internal audit unit. I have a report of personnel from another unit, that is the IT unit, I believe, and it became of concern to me because we were raising issues before as to the kind of things that the IT unit should be doing with regards to the mobile app, etc. But I have a report that basically says that some members of staff are not on duty and being paid by the ADB, although they are not on duty at present. Is that true? Are you aware that there may be staff members who have been sent home, permanent staff members who are on the establishment, and as we are talking about the establishment having vacancies, we have individuals who are on the establishment but who are not at work at present, not because they have taken leave, but because they are simply not at work. And I'm not referring to I'm not at work today, I'm not at work tomorrow. They are simply not, although they are on the establishment and being paid by the ADB, their services are not being utilized, especially given and it's of concern, especially given the issue we just spoke about at the internal audit unit, where you have a shortage shortage requirement there, and you have just indicated you have vacancies in the establishment. And I'm not suggesting that, based on information that has come to us, that there may be persons who are on the establishment whose services are not being utilized at this point.
Mr. Chair, if I may, you first mentioned IT department.
I think it's not just,
general?
I mentioned IT because it was one of the areas that we were talking about that required specific attention, etc. And you had said you had a small IT department. But I think this goes not just with regards to IT. There may be other instances where there are persons on the establishment that are not at work at this point.
Chair, what I can say, I don't, the CEO will let me know there are more. Currently, 4 members of staff who have been sent on paid suspension, pending investigation, coming out of the audit reports. So, as is the norm in the industrial relations, they step aside while the process is undertaken.
So those members would have been subject to some sort of investigation, and that's the reason why they are not.
Yeah, and it's ongoing, so we can't say too much. I don't know if there are any more than 4.
No, not that I know of.
And this would be in, okay, good. So that clears that up. Go back to the the audit unit. Specifically, you fall under the procurement rules and regulations, the Procurement Act of Trinidad and Tobago, Office of Procurement Regulator, correct? How has the implementation of the Procurement Act been facilitated at the ADB? Would you say that you are up to scratch with regards to the implementation of the Procurement Act?
I will pass it over to the CEO, but I know we have been actively looking into it. We have sought guidance on what we need to do based on the size of our entity and filling those roles. So the CEO can have more details on that.
Mr. Chair, so yes, we do have a named procurement officer, and of course in the capacity as acting CEO, the accounting officer is named as well. The adherence to the guidelines provided and by way of legislation, the Public Property and Disposal of Public Property Act, ADB has attended all of the training sessions. We have been able to submit our annual requirements as well, and our procurement practices are aligned to what is provided in the handbooks. What I would say though, we are currently filling the vacancy for a corporate secretary, which is an important role for the PDAC. And once that vacancy is filled, we will be resourced sufficiently to ensure that the procedures are fully adhered to.
Thank you very much, Madam CEO. Can you give us a little synopsis in a couple of minutes, an indication of how you procure service providers? Let me help you in directing the answer. In many of the other agencies, there's an established list from which we select from. Would it be true to say that you have a list of service providers who would have been registered appropriately, etc., and to whom you go to for provision of services?
Yes, so we do have a list of service providers, those persons that would have met our requirements. The registry right now allows us as well to go in and certify service providers based on our requirements. That has been the way we have operated for the past year that I've been there, where we go to the registry, we look for providers who are registered, and for those that we have assessed based on the requirements to satisfy our needs. Once that is done, all our procurement are aligned to the practice of the handbooks, which stipulates the threshold under which you can actually so select or use the three-code system. The recent amendment has been beneficial to the ADB because our expenditure is significantly, smaller than the excess of the $1 million expenditure that is traditionally seen in other organizations. So that given that those levels of expenditure and item one-time purchase, it has been beneficial for the organization to use the simplified requirements that have now been put in place for state entities.
All right, so thank you. So you would have, for example, a list of approved valuators that deal with mortgage and real estate, a list of approved valuators for vehicles, for tractors, for machinery and equipment, for fishing vessels, a list of quantity surveyors, a list of attorneys for contentious and for non-contentious legal issues, etc., correct? How is that list determined? You just described that. I'm assuming. In fact, let me let you answer. How is that list determined? And I want to deal specifically with attorneys and with the insurance companies.
All right, so those lists are aligned to our credit policy. So they are approved for use by the branches in the administration of credit. Therefore, for example, the insurance providers would be the industry players in Trinidad and Tobago, and those persons that are assessed based on their responses to the bank and our customer needs and the performance of the service providers. With respect to the attorneys, that is a panel of attorneys that serves the bank for the execution of credit duties, and that's the credit administration part of it, as well as the corporate service part of it. That panel is also reviewed by the board of directors based on the submission from management for the bank by a regular review process. Now, I would say that within recent times, we have not reviewed the legal panel. The credit administration, the credit policy is currently being reviewed, and therefore the suppliers that provides that service aligned to that policy for branches, being, let's say, insurance, valuators, and so on, that will be reviewed together with the submission for the credit policy. The last review was done in 2018 for the credit policy.
Thank you. Even though the board may look at the list, the board is still mandated to operate based on the lists of approved providers. Is that correct?
At this point in time, yes.
Would you be aware, Madam CEO, of any previous instance within the last 2 years in which contracts would have been awarded to entities which were not on that list of approved providers?
For insurance purposes, unless
Let me narrow it down to not insurance, but specifically to legal fees.
yes, based on the needs and requirements of the bank has engaged services of legal providers outside of the approved panel.
What would have been the criteria for that selection?
The selection would have been based on the needs of the organization and the independent perspective of the matter before the organization.
Now, the reason I'm asking is because I have some documentation that has been provided to me, which gives me of grave concern, because a lot of these matters are predictable. So it's not, in fact, the documentation I have in front of me, which I'll clarify with you just now, is not based on something new, something different. It's the same process, the same procedures, the same issues that are typical of a bank. In fact, some of the issues for which, let me say differently, all of the issues confronting the bank today would have been confronting the bank last week, last month, last year, and for years before. These are not brand new types of issues requiring different levels of technical competence, which may be outside of the list of attorneys that you would have had and used previously. So therefore, my clear question to you, ma'am, is what specific conditions which did not exist at all previously, what specific conditions would have existed that would have required you to access legal services outside of an approved list that has guided the bank for decades? You said you had not amended or changed the bank's lists for attorneys for a little while. So therefore, this particular instance that I'm looking at, I want to know specifically, I think the committee will be clearer for it, what specific issue would have emerged that required the technical competence to be sourced from outside of your list? What specific issue would have been required?
As Chair mentioned earlier on, there was an instance of the outcome of an audit report that required the legal services of a provider that was outside of our panel, and the Board of Directors at the point in time opted to solicit the services of a provider that was not listed on the panel.
And this was because of the expertise of that particular provider?
As far as I'm aware of, yes.
This is legal?
Yes.
So then on what basis, so how then was that service provider selected? Was it sole selective tender, or did you go out for an assessment? Did you go out for regular tender? How then, given the procurement law, how then did you procure that specific service provider?
As far as I know, though, the legal services, that that part of it is exempted from the procurement requirements. However, the procurement of the provider was done in collaboration with considering the matter before us, and the assistance of the then corporate secretary together with the members of the then board of directors.
So you went through a sole select process?
As far as I'm aware of.
Based on the technical competence of that particular legal provider. Ma'am, don't you think that something is absolutely wrong with that?
Chair, that was a decision of the board of directors at the point in time in collaboration with the corporate secretary, given the matter before the bank at that point in time.
Has the current board, which would have inherited this particular transaction, have you had a look at it, Mr. Chairman, at all, this particular instance, which have you had a look at all about this particular instance in which there seems to have been a movement away from traditional practice in procuring legal services?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Myself and the board, we have looked at it, and we did make inquiry as to why the particular provider was selected outside of the bank's panel. There were comments and suggestions, mainly what the acting CEO just said. Unfortunately, the persons who participated in our decision are not present. It is a bit of concern as to why it was done. There may have been circumstances unknown to us now at the time, and therefore I'm not in a position to question or justify why it was done at that time, but it's something we would not want to. We want to have it done in a manner that is transparent anytime going forward. We did continue the engagement, I would tell you, primarily because it's an ongoing, and to switch at this point in time, where we hopefully coming to the end of the engagement, would not serve any party better. The competence is fine. I believe there would have been other parties who could have justified, but I not being there at the time, I can't add any further to that, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I accept that you're new. That's why I asked you early on, because I told you I wanted to go in a particular direction. Right? That's why. So I accept that you would not have been part of the decision making, and I think that you had indicated that your corpsec is, you have a vacancy for a corpsec. So it seems that some of the decision makers then are not here to answer the question. However, this seems to be a breach of the procurement regulations, although legal practice, etc., may not fit squarely into the law, but it seems to be a breach at least of procedure and precedent from the ADB itself. Let me ask a different question, because there are some other questions that the Secretariat had raised here, which involves the process by which an employee can register a complaint if they think that something is wrong is being done by another employee or another entity within the organizational structure itself. You have a policy for that, correct?
Yes, we do. There is the whistleblowing policy.
Can you advise whether or not that policy was triggered by any reports from any member of staff with regards to this particular transaction where two attorneys not on the list were in fact hired and employed, and as indicated by Chairman, at least one of them is still in process of being engaged by the entity. Can you advise whether any member of staff raised any issue with regards to this particular transaction and this particular incident?
Chair, as far as I know, given my acting appointment in May of 2023, outside of the 4 employees who are currently under investigation, this matter has not been raised or brought to my attention by way of the whistleblowing policy.
Maybe I should ask, because this is a finance issue and an administration issue, Mr. Garraway, as corporate manager, would you be aware of any of those? No, not everything reaches the CEO, I'm sure. But Mr. Garraway, would you be aware of any issues, any concerns being raised by anyone with regards to the employment of specific legal persons, legal providers, lawyers, legal firms, outside of this list that ADB would have spent years creating as approved legal service providers?
Chair, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure, that's quite a bit. Would you be aware of any concerns that would have been raised with regards to the employment of lawyers outside of the approved list from the ADB?
As the corporate manager of finance and administration at that time, yes, I was aware of instances where persons were engaged outside of the listing.
And so would you have raised that issue with anybody else?
Yes, Chair, I would have had.
Can you provide, just for clarification, the nature of your concern?
Due to the requirements of the bank at the time and the procurement of the individuals in terms of the investigation that was on hand, my concern would have been the procurement process in itself in getting persons on board. I know it was raised in terms of how quickly the services were needed, but my concerns at the time were what the procurement process was and also what methodology was used in terms of selection.
Thank you very much for your forthrightness. To your knowledge, has this situation ever occurred before? Has there ever been a time when legal services in particular were provided or sourced outside of your approved list?
At this time, I would not have that information, but just off the top of my head, no.
Thank you. I want to go back to the CEO. So specifically with regards to these two attorneys selected, I can't recall, it's been a long day, but I can't recall if you had indicated the specific methodology of hiring these two particular legal practitioners who are not on your previous list or on any amended list as at today's date at the ADB. Would you need their names, or would you be able? Well, I'm sure you know who they are.
Chair, upon taking office in May of 2023, I inherited the attorneys who are presiding on a matter for the bank that are outside of our panel. I can get back to you on writing by way of the board minutes into the further explanation for the procurement of the and selection of those attorneys.
I was a bit distracted, but can you just repeat in the method of selection? So you were not physically present at that time. You inherited a process. Now, having inherited the process and being now aware that a procedure was not necessarily an acceptable procedure, especially given the procurement legislation, especially given the practice even at the ADB, that accepted procedure was not necessarily followed in the selection of these individuals. Your chairman just indicated that it would have been easier just to let it continue at this point because it's already a work in progress. But what mechanism has been put in place to ensure, firstly, that such a practice does not occur going forward? And secondly, to treat with the persons who would have made such a decision, which would, at least clearly have raised some concerns in the eyes of your corporate manager and maybe others for finance. Because as a finance person myself, I would be extremely concerned if we have an established procedure and we go outside of the procedure. So it's not good enough to say that the persons involved are not present, because the entity involved is still you. You would have inherited an entity which would have engaged in a practice which is questionable. And therefore, because you are still having to make payments, you should have put something in place to flag that and to treat with it in some form of fashion. I'm hoping that in your response now, you indicate how it was flagged and what exactly has been put in place to make sure that there's no recurrence.
So, Chair, the matter is still an open matter. the investigation has not been closed at this point in time. With respect to the details of the selection and so on, I will have to go back to the board notes prior to my time to be able to offer that to you. Certainly, with respect to matters moving forward at this point in time, what I have before me can be treated and is being treated with the panel that serves the bank and that has been approved for the bank. We have not engaged any providers outside of the approved panel. But for the matter that is currently being investigated, that, as I said, is ongoing. It has not been closed at this point in time.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand. Is it that if you have an approved list of attorneys that you're using over a period of time, and you have a matter or matters that require expertise that is outside of this panel, that it is not implicit that you may still employ someone who is not on the list, but who may be more suitable to deal with this matter? Is that what is?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is the matters that I do have before me, as far as I understand them to be, and the services that are required, I can work with what is on the panel and not make any advancements for expertise or assistance independent of the skill set that is provided by way of the panel that we currently have.
I'm asking, you have a panel, yes? If you have a matter, right? Cannot the board make a decision that you go outside the panel in particular cases?
Yes, I believe so. We can make the recommendation to get that approval.
May I just add to what the CEO said? The board has the ultimate authority to approve the lists of the various providers and any variation thereof. I think what may be in question here is there if you have to go outside of the panel, is there a proper selection process? And if it has to be a sole source, then what is the justification to ensure that there is transparency and clarity on what was done? What we're saying now, we don't have that clarity. The board minutes may have something, but it may not have the minds of the people. So that will be the process, and going forward, such contract has to come to the board through the different committees and ultimately the board. The COSEC, in this case of legal, would have a significant input in recommending and making a justification, and the board will make the decision whether we should, if there's a recommendation, whether we should indeed go outside of any of the panels. So that is what the process should be going forward. Whether it was discussed in that manner when the selection was made, we are unable to tell. We'll look at the minutes and see if there's anything we could send to clarify to the committee. Hopefully that.
Yes. So I just wanted to be sure that there must be, to my mind, some time or some rationale or opportunity for deviation in spite of this settled list.
Yeah, clearly, it's a flexible world. You have to be dynamic.
Definitely.
But within, everything must
follow
rules and scrutiny,
exactly.
etc.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, please. I want to turn over to my colleague.
Right. Thank you. I just wanted to go back, CEO, to something the chairman raised a little earlier with respect to some staff who were sent on leave, and they have been there, I think, was a date called last year?
No date.
No, how long have they been out, CEO?
October 2023.
So that's October 2023 to, we are now in what, the 6th, in June of this year. So we are talking about almost, 9 months out of the organization with pay. I mean, there is nothing in your strategic plan. I mean, I don't know your organization that told me that you have an important organization as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the committee is concerned, it's very important and could do even more work with respect to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. However, to me, it's not a large organization when I look at the head count, etc. And maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know how complex this investigation that you have that is now ongoing that can keep employees at that level out for 8 months, I think maybe you all should be a little more humane with respect to coming to a decision one way or the other, because this is time going, people's lives are on the line, because once the investigation is open, it means that there's no conclusion at this point in time. Remember, there's people's lives, there's this aura of doubt or whatever is cast on them, and that really is not good enough. Sometimes we have to walk in other people's shoes. So if it is, I can offer some advice to try and come to some kind of decision as quickly as possible. One way or the other, say, well, whatever we have, our conclusion is that you have to go or you have to stay, because we are talking about people's careers here. That's what I want to offer in that regard. And then with respect to your, I'm still within your, you have an appendix here with your loan portfolio. Appendix 9. This was a document that came in June 21st, 2023. I don't know if you were at the organization then, acting CEO, meaning if you were in that position and if you're aware of this document which came. And it's on Appendix 9, legal matters outsourced, attorneys engaged. But it's not really the attorneys I'm on to now. There was a area that is, you're talking about a grand total of 420 loans as at that time, June 21st, 2023. And they referred of which you had some, 96 or 86? It's very small. 86 have been discharged. So if there was a grand total of this loan portfolio of 420, I don't know what it is at current date, but 86 have been discharged. It's about 20% of the loan portfolio. What does this charge mean? Is it that they were paid off or they were deemed to be delinquent, insolvent, and one came to that decision? And is it now that if there were lands involved, that the bank would have recovered those lands or taken over those lands? What it is? Because what I'm seeing here is a big number, $70.7 million in loans in this particular portfolio. And the other part is, I'm seeing that there's a small footer that the legal costs charged were now to the client's account. So they can't pay their loan. Is it that this legal cost that is about 10% of the 70 million, how are you going to recover that, the legal cost? Because it has been placed on their account, an account that is already hard for them to pay or they're not servicing, as the case might be. You have that document before you? Are you aware of it?
Yes, I do have Appendix 9.
Yes.
Just to provide some explanation, these are the cases majority of these cases are in recoveries. As a matter of fact, all they are recovery cases. They would be at different stages in the legal process. So therefore, for each one, they can be, they are currently being recovered on for different items of collateral. Where there is landed security, the property can either be freehold or state lease land, because ADB is an institution that takes state lease lands as an item of collateral. There can be chattel mortgages and so on, depending on the defined security item. For the discharge loans, those have basically come to an end, and we can move the case now to the point of discharge from the process. For those that remain, the bank still has to engage the process of recovery. That, as I said, is heavily dependent on the item of collateral and the client's willingness to pay, as well as the outcome of the legal process. So in some instances, we may have judgments, we may have the sale of property, we may have negotiations with the customers to continue to pay and so on. So that is what really constitutes Appendix 9.
But when you say 420 loans in delinquency as at that time, you find that is big? Is that a large amount?
Well,
I mean, comparing to what the entire portfolio looks like.
Development institutions usually see a transition of loans to recoveries, but I would say that this list constitutes all those loans that would have been transferred to the recovery department over the years, over the history of the bank, and different stages in the process of recovery. So it is a movement that happens from the branches once they exceed their delinquency status at the branch where it is now required that these loans are transferred to the recovery department. It is moved across there, and that is where those actions are taken.
But are you satisfied with the movement? You have a kind of benchmark, kind of process, a policy in terms of it moves from here to there within 3 days, within 3 months, and is it working its way through the system, consistently?
No CEO will be satisfied with loans moving to their recovery department. No lender would be satisfied with that. I accept that it's part of the process. Certainly, I would like to see it a little bit lower, well, significantly lower, or the movements happening less frequently.
With respect to the Ministry of Agriculture, is it that they synchronize their own strategic plans with the bank? Because given that, let us say you are the financial arm, in terms of, okay, we need this kind of crop to be planted now, do you all get down into that level of detail in terms of the collaboration?
It's done the other way around. So ADB usually takes their lead off the Ministry of Agriculture and their plan for actions and the interest in the agriculture sector. So understanding our role and function as the financing institution that supports the development of agriculture, we take our lead from the ministry, but the Ministry of Agriculture has close oversight over the bank. We work in tandem with the planning division, and as I mentioned earlier on with ETIS. So we are aware of their programs, and we do align our targets in keeping with the objectives of the ministry.
But in terms of engendering a kind of planting culture, sometimes that starts in the home, in the schools. And not long ago, I don't know if they still do it, they'll carry little seedlings, and kids were very excited to see plants grow, so that they kind of get that kind of culture of, that we must grow things. So it starts there, and you more or less at the other end as they go through secondary school into university. They may choose agriculture. I mean, we really need to have more farmers and people who understand the thing at an intellectual level and are satisfied that they can make it into a business. Very recently, I happened to be in Tobago, and I was so happy to see many of the villagers, the residents, that is their lifeblood, and they were so proud of what they do. They were telling you, I think, out of Tobago, I think it's £1 million of produce comes out of that area every year. I find that to be amazing, and if we can get more communities such, so they create jobs right there. You'll have the traffic, you'll have this and that and the other. Right there in your community, you just walk to work, and it's a whole community-based effort. So the whole pride, it's a lot that this could bring in terms of as a cooperative, and I think the ADP should really lead that charge because you have everything going for you already.
Yes, thank you, Member. And I would like to say as well that you will see part of our CSR initiatives are aligned to schools. Although we do not actively always get business conversions from their career fairs and so on, we ensure that we participate in the career fairs, and especially for the schools doing agriculture and those schools that are in the rural communities. Those schools where there's heavy focus on the curriculum or the inclusion of agriculture at the CSEC level, ADB ensures that once we're invited or we do have the network to know that there is a career fair happening, we know the business conversion may be limited, but as part of our CSR work, we ensure that we are there. And as I said, even at the primary school levels in the rural communities in Trinidad and Tobago, we make sure we expend our resources to be a part of the agriculture agenda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, so we're not going to keep you much longer. Just a couple more questions from the members of the public. And it ironically follows again from questions that were asked by my colleague just now. What is the current, well, there are 3 questions here. What is the current recoveries portfolio value? So I'll ask them one and you can answer if you have the opportunity, if you have the information, sorry. What is the current recoveries portfolio value?
Chair, may I be permitted to send that to you in writing?
Sure, thank you. Secondly, does the ADB have adequate security to recover delinquent loans?
Does the ADB?
Does the ADB have adequate security to recover delinquent loans?
All right. So loans, as I said, are collateralized by different items that ADB can either put a mortgage or a hold on. The collateral position is accepted at the point of loan appraisal and loan decision. So once let's say about a loan size of $10,000 is collateralized by an item valued at $8,000, if the decision is to accept it, at the point of delinquency, the ADB is aware that we took that risk and we can only collateralize, we can only recover $8,000 because that was the accepted and approved collateral at that point in time. But to be more direct to answer your question, the loans are tailored to the means and assets and the project viability of the individual borrower, so that your loan may not be the same as my loan, and therefore to recover the security position for your loan may not be the same as mine. There are guidelines, though, in our credit policy that assist our loans officers and our approving authorities to make those decisions.
But there's still some flex depending on the individual consideration, just like with every other loan facility.
Most definitely, ADB has our flagship loan product, which caters to the individual needs of the borrowers and their financial capability and project's viability.
Last question from the member of the public. What percentage of the portfolio is actually recoverable?
Again, Chair, I will have to send that in writing to you, but that will require detailed analysis. I may not be able to send that within 1 week, so I'll ask you kindly for a period of 2 weeks to send that for you.
Sure, I thank you for that. I want to go back to one last question before I give my colleagues the last opportunities. According to your submission, the ADB submission to the committee, the bank established its risk and compliance policy and procedures, which were approved by the Board of Directors. This policy is currently being reviewed. Now, I accept that this would have been submitted to us a few months ago. So can you advise what is the current status of the bank's risk and compliance policy and procedures?
Yes, Chair, we have approved risk and compliance policies and procedures, and that is also backed by annual audits, independent audits of those, of the functioning of the risk and compliance department. But I would also say, though, that we are currently in the process of recruiting the corporate manager, risk and compliance, to provide the expertise required to lead that department.
You said that in the same submission that the ADB has developed and implemented an expected credit loss model, with the assistance of an independent external consultant, in order to assess the impairment of its loan portfolio. So this is just the loan portfolio. It's not directly related to the compliance policy, but this is the loan portfolio we're speaking about. My question is fairly straightforward. What was the criteria used to hire this external consultant?
So, Chair, I'll pass that to Mr. Garraway. He was actively involved in that process. Mr. Garraway, can you first?
Thank you, Sue. At that time, due to the international financial reporting standards, the ADB had to move from IS 39 to IFRS 9. And at that time, due to the fact that we did not have the internal expertise to create the expected credit loss model, it was decided to create a scope, and we went out to tender for the service. So the firm that was hired went through the process. They had an evaluation. It was approved by the board, and we have since adopted that IFRS 9 and utilized the ECL model from 2019 to present. And that's in the creation of the provision for loan losses for every year.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent, excellent. With regards to the risk and compliance policy, with that risk and compliance policy, you said you had completed it, it's been approved, it's been implemented?
Yes, Chair. So we have it encrypted as a compliance manual, and that though the lead for that is the corporate manager, risk and compliance. That position is vacant and currently being addressed.
So we have a manual, but no way to implement it.
The corporate manager, risk and compliance, he resigned from the organization last year, July 2023. So we are in the process of recruiting for that position.
Now, I'm assuming that that compliance manual impacts every decision taken by every expenditure item in particular taken by the bank itself. It impacts that risk and compliance manual guides the actions of all parties involved in every action of the bank, correct? Or is that too general?
Our risk and compliance focus in this approved manual is on AML CFT and in particular, AML, anti-money laundering. And there is the enterprise risk management component of it, which speaks directly to what you're asking. And that is the expectation that has to be ruled out with that component, with the recruitment of the corporate manager for that position.
And that will relate to all actions taken by employees of the ADB, but it will also guide actions of the board of directors if it is engaged in, if the board or any member of the board is engaged in actions which create an expenditure item for the bank, correct?
There will be oversight on the enterprise risk management component of it, yes.
So we are not likely to have an incident where, for example, a board manager, or board director, sorry, not a manager, board director engages in a transaction approved by the board, approved by the bank, approved by the board, and increases the value of a contract unilaterally.
No, and the public procurement and disposal of property, Public Property Act as well, to me is a very important piece of legislation that would prevent any sort of interference that you are mentioning.
Thank you. I want to turn over to my colleague, Senator.
If I may, just before adding on to what you said, the corporate manager, risk and compliance, and the enterprise risk framework that we're speaking about will work hand in hand with the internal audit department in providing that oversight for the entity and also comfort to the board. It is more of a management and oversight role, measuring the risk and indicating where we are deviating from approved policies. So it is a key oversight role and not necessarily an operational role that will stymie the flow or the efficiency of the organization. But it's a key role that will work in tandem with internal audit to give a broader oversight of all risk of the organization. That's a little clarity.
Thank you very much, Chairman, but you have just raised my concern even more, because that individual, that key person, is not in office. There's a vacancy for that position. And your internal audit team, which you also are hoping to gel with this person who does not exist right now, is also short-staffed. So you have two constraints working against you, against the efficient operation of the ADB, with specific regard to ensuring compliance with regards to the expenditure of funds.
We share that concern, and hence those three key posts are our priority right now: the COSEC, risk and compliance.
Have they been advertised, sir? Have those positions been advertised?
The COSEC, I went through the portal, Caribbean jobs, and so we have that shortlist. The final list to the board now to decide on the interviews. We also have the risk and compliance. We have a number of applications being shortlisted. The CEO can say exactly what portals we use. For the CEO position, we are looking for a professional recruiting firm. So we have invited from the OPR, the list of registered firms, 6 entities to submit proposals. We got 4, and we're going through that process now. So those are key positions to give the board comfort and to give the organization some stability.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to congratulate you on the things that you are tracking I didn't know banks track those things, but it's very useful because it seems to me you're looking to see that you want to increase your efficiency. Now, I just look at your table illustrating the processing time of loans reviewed. And it is a wide range. A loan can be processed in less than a week, and there is one case where you have 5 months. Now tell me, because we know we're into truth. The variance arises. Is it because of the inefficiencies of staff procedures? Or is it, which is more, or is it that the people who come and they bring their applications in, they just don't have all that is required? So tell me honestly, is it half and half? Is it, to what extent is each party responsible? Because it's a wide variance, as I said. It could be 5 months, it could be a few days.
Yes. There are established targets for loan approvals. Loans at the branch level, the approval time is 4 days. That is encrypted in the credit administration
No, I see all that, right? So we can skip that part. Just tell me the
It is, I believe it is a combination of both. Understanding that for the assessment of our credit, they are project-based, and a customer will come in, they will inquire on a loan, they will get their list of requirements. Sometimes it takes them a little bit longer to satisfy all of the requirements. Additionally, during the assessment process, additional information may be required, and therefore the loans officer has to go back. So the negotiation process itself may impact the loans processing time, but I do believe that there are areas for us to improve our efficiency on the delivery of the loan decisions.
And I thank you for that straightforward answer. Now, in terms of error days, I see that you have some days where you have a number of errors and some days few errors. What happens as a result of that when you find that you have many errors? You look to see where it's coming from. What do you do with the person? What happens? And I ask that because in account, sometimes you don't realize things can happen. Another experience this week where I went into a bank and I saw deposited in my account, I was trying to track something, was a check that had nothing to do with my company. It was not made out to me. I didn't know the company that had made it out to the person, and I was in shock. And this was saying, "You're telling me, yes, this is your account." It was a complete mistake. And I worried about that other person, what could be happening. Suppose you had to pay that loan urgently and you put that money in and it's going into Thompson IE account and she knows nothing about it. So things happen which have serious implications.
Yes, things do happen. We actively engage in training. We benefit from a core banking system that allows us to track transactions and even run some of the trial balance to see variance where we can make adjustments. But most importantly, when these matters are addressed at the level of the auditors, they are taken back to the corporate manager in charge where capacity is built in the branches, and if it requires advance action, that is taken. That is our normal procedure. However, I would say at this point in time, we are actively engaging in building the capacity of our frontline people to address the inefficiencies, but also to address the needs of the farming community in a serious way for the delivery of the loans and the quality of loans that are placed on our books.
So you think that's a feature of your company, or is that done across in various banks? You have no idea.
I might be able to speak more to various banks, but from my experience and knowledge, project-based lending is a little bit more intricate to assess because you are dealing with individual borrowers with different projects and different project design, different financial capabilities, different items of collateral. For example, if there's a demand mortgage on a freehold parcel of land, the requirements for that is significantly different to mortgage to be placed on state lease land. Our frontline officer has to have that knowledge and be able to impart that borrower whose interest is really in trying to get the productive gains of their farm. Their interest is, I need to get this money and I need to invest and get the desired cash flow. On the back end, you have to have the skill set to negotiate and inform that customer. For example, a fishing loan, what are the statutory requirements? For a livestock loan, what do you require to ensure there's compliance with the regulations of the land? Certainly, you would not want to establish a poultry farm in excess of 10,000 birds next to a resident where there's effluent and so on that you have to deal with. Those are things that require the loans officer to have, first of all, in knowledge and to be comfortable enough to share that knowledge with the prospective borrower and work with them to ensure there is also compliance, because the our loans, there are conditions to the loan. In some instances where there is some level of understanding on behalf of the bank, it is encrypted in the loan approval as a condition, and therefore there's still the responsibility, it is still the responsibility of the client to get that requirement and submit it to the bank, particularly for livestock loans.
What I'm seeing here is an increase in your line item for advertisement, public education. So look at that. I think it will help to save your time and the time of the client. I don't charge for that advice, eh?
All right, so we have no further questions from my colleagues, and therefore it falls on me to thank you all very much today for your presence and for your frank and open conversation with the committee and the provision of information. We have a few outstanding documentations which will be submitted to us within the next couple of weeks, I assume. And therefore, I want to again thank representatives of the Agricultural Development Bank, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and the Auditor General's Department for your presence and your contribution here today. And I also want to use the opportunity to thank members of the viewing audience for tuning in. At this point, we will now conclude the on-camera session and revert to off-camera session. I thank you all again once more. Go home safely.
Thank you very much.
Targeting sort of.
I'm recommending an increase in salary.